you've got McGuire Richmond, the Kansas State linebacker commit, that they had playing a rover safety role.
Yeah.
And that gives you a taste of just how healthy he is. And I spoke about him on last week's episode when we were talking to Dylan Duff about, hey, this was a guy that K-State felt like the tape didn't match what he was doing at camps last year. And talking to McGuire, that was exactly it. He had a little nagging injury, went out to camps, ran a 4.9, and K-State was the team that just said, that doesn't smell right. We're going to stay on you, and kudos to K-State, because I think they might have gotten a pretty good one. He was as fluid as we've ever seen him, Kevin.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello, and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here with Ryan Wallace, courtesy of GoPowerCat.com and 24/7 Sports. And we're going to talk about the world of local recruiting here in Kansas City, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. In case you missed it, our opening round of episodes saw us interview the quarterback commitment at each of those three local schools. Talked to Matt Zollers at Missouri, Dylan Duff at Kansas State, and David McComb at Kansas. So make sure you go back and watch those shows if you haven't already. And if you like what you're hearing, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple and Spotify. Ryan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. This will be a fun episode for us, Kevin, because I think kind of the debut trio that we had last week with all three quarterback commitments. I think that was kind of a precursor a little bit of what fans and listeners can expect to hear as we dive into each team's recruiting classes and kind of talk to the future at each prospective program. And then we jump into this week where we don't have any interviews, but it's right up our wheelhouse in terms of if you're into scouting evaluations and wanting to know kind of who's next on the KC radar, then again, this will kind of give an example of the other side of what we can do on this show. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, people who watch that first episode and they watch this one, you'll get a pretty complete feel for kind of what we're trying to do here. One of the things that our producer, Nick Springer, says, is when media days kind of hit for football, it's kind of the kickoff, right? You start thinking like, hey, the season's almost here. I kind of feel like Mill Valley 7-on-7 is that way for the high school season, right?
Yeah.
When you go to that event, you get to see, a lot of prospects from around the Kansas City area. You bring in a few from a little further out. This time we had Highland Park there from Topeka. You had Derby, coming up from the Wichita area. But you get to see a lot of local kids sort of in one place. They've got helmets on. It's close to football season, and you get to see these guys sort of before practice starts. And so it's kind of like that kickoff event as well. Ryan, this year's version, teams, they kind of take this event seriously or not so seriously in terms of trying to win it, get reps and things like that. It is still really instructive. One of the things that we did notice, Blue Valley won the thing, and Ryan, they looked really good doing it.
Yeah, undefeated in doing so. I mean, this is a field, Kevin, that I think when I went back and looked, it was 6 programs that reached the quarterfinals in last November's bracket, right? So, and just about everybody from the 5 or 6A level. Trying to think if there might have been a 4A in there. I don't think there was, but yeah, you're looking at a really talented group of programs and programs that have been historically good of late, right? Derby, Blue Valley Northwest as well. And then, of course, bringing schools in from the Missouri side, Ray-Pec was there, and we'll probably touch on a Panther or two here in a little bit. But you talk about Blue Valley, and that's first off. Let's get this out of the way, Kevin. I'm a Blue Valley alum.
Yep.
So you're going to hear a little bit about the Tigers quite a bit on this show from me, and keeping a close ear to that program. You kind of knew that this was going to be a year that they had some serious potential. They've always seemed to have guys the last several years that have gotten the Power 5. So they've been a program that's never been short on notoriety. But in terms of actual success, going for a state title, this seemed like the year that Alan Terrell felt like all the pieces were in place. And Kevin, it looked that way at Mill Valley. They went undefeated through this bracket. Day one undefeated. Then they go into the win or go home kind of thing. I think it's a double elimination bracket on Saturday. And they went unscathed through that as well. Did have a team or two that gave them a run for their money. But Kevin, really complete team. Obviously, the headliners were headlining things from what we could tell. And that was Dawson Merritt, the Alabama commit at linebacker, who was just intimidating as all get out. He's got the black visor out there. Looked like he'd put on probably 10 solid pounds of muscle. A good weight at that. You've got McGuire Richmond, the Kansas State linebacker commit, that they had playing a rover safety role.
Yeah.
And that gives you a taste of just how healthy he is. And I spoke about him on last week's episode when we were talking to Dylan Duff about, hey, this was a guy that K-State felt like the tape didn't match what he was doing at camps last year. And talking to McGuire, that was exactly it. You know, he had a little nagging injury, went out to camps, ran a 4.9, and K-State was the team that just said, that doesn't smell right. We're going to stay on you, and kudos to K-State, because I think they might have gotten a pretty good one. He was as fluid as we've ever seen him, Kevin. And then you start thinking about kind of the assets that they're starting to put in place on offense. They're not going to have a John Price this year, but I think they're okay. I think they've got better weapons at receiver. Most people have already heard about the Lockett twins. I like another sophomore receiver, Grant Westfall, who's a stud baseball player, but if you haven't seen him play football yet, I think there's a bright future there if he chooses to go that route. Chris Aiello at quarterback was a really efficient game manager. But Kevin, as I toss it back to you, I think what caught my attention right away was the unity that this team plays with. They were the number one seed, and there were obviously, when you get a bunch of 15 to 18-year-olds out there, things get a little chirpy. Didn't really see a whole lot of feedback from Blue Valley. They kept their mouth shut. They kind of enjoyed relishing have the target on their back. And again, a team that I think will be led by defense, Kevin, because again, you've got a Dawson Merritt and a McGuire Richmond and a Lincoln Stuvey, who's their talented defensive end, that obviously in 7-on-7, you don't have offensive linemen or defensive linemen out there. I think that gives them a really, really stout defense that should be able to carry them deep into November.
Can you be physical in 7-on-7? And the reason I ask is there was a play where Dawson Merritt went over the middle to kind of defend a play and wound up about killing a kid, and he laid off of him. And it's funny because on one hand you say, well, they're not in pads, so that probably really hurt. On the other hand, you say if they would have been in pads, Dawson Merritt would not have laid off that guy. I thought he looked really good. And not that I didn't expect for him to. Obviously, he's going to Alabama for a reason. But you see the twitch, you see the movement skills, you see the frame, all of those things that you want to see for somebody who's projected to go to that level. I'm glad you brought up McGuire, though, because I think what I've seen him in the past, in these sorts of settings, McGuire's such a good football player, right? Like you see guys that are 4-5 that don't play like they're 4-5 because they don't know what they're doing. They're not as aggressive. You see guys that are 4-8 that play more like they're 4-5 because they know what they're doing, all those things. He's a much better football player than he is a 7-on-7 player. Let's get that out of the way.
Right.
But when you saw the way that he was even going about his drops, the way that he was flipping his hips, the way that, with him playing sort of that rover safety role like you were talking about, there were a couple plays where the ball's thrown out to the sideline, and you could even see just the straight line speed for him to get in and be a factor there. That was something, quite frankly, Ryan, I'm not sure I had seen in the past from him that really stood out this time.
No doubt. I mean, for as good a player as McGuire is, I think when we watched him even at times last season, you were thinking, man, he's really strong between the tackles, right? I mean, he's going to make all the plays from a tackling standpoint. Coverage, it's just tougher to see in the fall. And again, how much of full strength was he at? It's hard to say, but watching him on Saturday morning, he's covering sideline to sideline with ease. And like you said, flipping his hips. I was just really impressed with what Blue Valley put on the field as a total product, but particularly the defense. And again, Kevin, not to put any pressure on the Tigers, but this is a 7-on-7 tournament where the past champions have been Derby, a state runner-up a year ago, And I think the year before that, it was Mill Valley, and, well, they win state damn near every year. So, I mean, the high expectations to go unscathed through this tournament if you're the Blue Valley Tigers.
Yeah, and I know we were impressed with several other players and teams there as well. I thought Lawrence looked good when we watched them. Tulsa quarterback commit Banks Bowen probably played about as well as I had seen. Yeah. Showed poise. Had some nice accuracy. Was patient. The Chesty Lions were missing, unfortunately, Josh Galbraith, who is one of the state's top prospects for 2026. A guy that we both would have loved to see. I saw him at KU camp, but always would have loved to get eyes on him.
Right.
Again, they're crosstown rivals, though. Lawrence Free State, showcase some nice players defensively. Ryan, it kind of helps them to have some KU ties there because you've got Draven Samuel, KU coach's son. Noah Simpson, KU coach's son. You've got Parker Moore, who's got KU ties as well. All of those players played really well, I thought, for Lawrence Free State when we were watching it.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm had to leave early on Saturday, so I don't know how the bracket actually shook out. But I know watching the Free State Blue Valley game, Free State was, dare I say, a controversial call away from pulling an upset there. It would have been Blue Valley's only their first loss, so they might have been able to still bounce back. But I mean, if there was anybody that gave Blue Valley a run for their money during bracket play, it was Lawrence Free State. I was highly impressed with the Firebirds. Talking to Coach Stewart in the winter, I was able to get on campus with them and talk to a couple of their guys, Parker Moore being one, who I just really like. He's got some ties to the KU program. His dad played there. I think they would be foolish to let him get away. I would be really trying to get him on a PWO if at all possible, and just kind of see where things go, because he's just such a heady player, Kevin. And again, I think one of the things about his game is kind of how physical he can be in pursuit. And obviously, nobody's really rushing a passer in 7-on-7, so you didn't even get to see that side of him. He was just a kind of a spying linebacker all day. But you talk about him and you combine him with Samuel. I really like Lawrence Free State's defense. Yeah. And then their offense, too. Lance Leipold's son is a really good, just solid high school player. I don't know where he's going to go when it comes to college, but he's a really crisp route runner, and he can give you a guy that's going to get open on Friday nights. And speaking of their offense, Kevin, how cool was it to see Braden Wilmus out there as the snapper? And for any Free State people watching, no, he's not going to play center this year. But it was good to see him out there kind of getting that bond going with the guys. And it was also, Kevin, kind of another nod of a team that, maybe one of their strongest points in the offensive line wasn't there. So to have Free State look as good as they did without a guy like Wilmus being featured, you're feeling great if you're Coach Stewart.
Yeah, and real quick before we head into break, Mill Valley and Derby, pair of local powerhouses, always competing for state titles. In Mill Valley's case, always winning state titles. Both of them had really deep groups of talent. Derby was a little, not quite at 100%. Arias Finley, the 2027 running back, wasn't there. Would have loved to see him. I liked what I saw from him last year, including in person. Desan Brame was there the first day and did some really nice things. Wound up hurting his wrist. Sounds like it's not serious, so that's great things moving forward. We did get a chance to see Martell Jackson, though, who's going to K-State. And Ryan, type of traits that you want to see from your cornerback. Yeah,
I mean, he was locked down at this event and probably wasn't tested in terms of the types of receivers that he will see at the Power 5 level in terms of this event, and that's no knock on some of these receivers. Again, it's also, condensed field, so honestly, I don't know if anybody really would want to challenge him deep, though, but what impressed me most is we've heard on and on, Kevin, about Martell Jackson's speed. That's what got him on college radars. That's what got Kansas State initially interested. The length for me, though, and his ability to make up in quick spaces on passes and make quality jumps and find a way to get his hand in there with his long arms, a really, really good pickup for Kansas State. I still think there's elements of his game that assistant coach Van Malone's going to want to, develop and mature a little bit more. But you got to like where his floor is at right now heading into his senior year.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When you have a lot of length, you can make 4.5 seem like 4.3 because you've got that ability to make up. And he's a guy that also runs exceptionally well when you look at his 100-meter time and everything else. The two best prospects there, Ryan, just real quick, probably Dzefin Walker at Ray-Pec. He says he's considering all the local schools. Really good size, good frame, fantastic speed for his frame. He's considering the local schools. Also wants to visit Georgia. If I were running back, I would want to visit Georgia as well. And then Jaden Woods. This is our chance to see him at linebacker. Had been edge previously. And you and I think he's one of the top 2 prospects in the state, playing that role. Playing middle linebacker, got tired of people running away from him and said, you can't run away from him if we stick him in the middle of the defense. I thought he was so far ahead of where I thought he would be. The drops looked natural, the athleticism played up. Just another reminder of how adaptable an athlete he is. And I think that's one of the things we like most about him.
Yep, and I said it to you over the weekend. It reminded me a lot of when Olathe East had Nate Matlack. And again, same thing. They got tired of the opponents going the opposite direction of Nate. Come back his senior year, they said, we're going to stick you at middle linebacker, and you can do whatever you want and go wherever you want. And Jaden looked really fluid. I'm glad you brought up Dzefin Walker. We had a chance to kind of chat with him a little bit, and it sounds like, for the purposes of this show, the Missouri Tigers are going to still be involved. The Kansas Jayhawks are going to still be involved. Kansas State Wildcats are going to be involved. It sounded like he was intrigued about potentially seeing possibly all of those schools at some point this fall. He's really still wide open. And Kevin, we know how fast he is, but his body continues to fill out, looks every bit of 190 to maybe 200 pounds. There's a reason his offer sheet is the way it is. And that's going to be a kid, I think, here coming up this fall in Kansas City that will be, if he isn't already, will be one of the top Metro running backs. I think big things are ahead for him out at Ray-Pec this fall.
I think we're planning to have both Dzefin and Jaden Woods on our show at some point, during the season. We're going to get to some of our sleepers and breakout performers here in a minute. But first, we want to tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. Home Field has more than 150 colleges and ever growing to choose from Kansas and Kansas State to Missouri to the Banana Slugs of UC Santa Cruz. And you'll notice I'll mention them just about every time. I love the Banana Slugs gear. So between Kansas, K-State, and Missouri, there are 142 items to choose from. So if you head to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code linked below in the description, you can get 15% off your first order, and we will be right back.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
With big cell phone providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were going to pay magically skyrockets. But with Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So you can say bye-bye to overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. And better yet, all plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And if you're worried about keeping your own phone and your phone number, with Mint Mobile, you can keep your phone and your phone number and all of your existing contacts. So ditch overpriced wireless to the Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. That's mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. Ryan, we talked about some of the more sort of highly touted prospects, guys that a lot of people already knew about that we saw at Mill Valley. But let's get into our breakout players. And I know that a guy that we noticed both on the camp circuit and at Mill Valley is wide receiver Trevor Garlington at Blue Valley Northwest. What do you like about Trevor?
Yeah, I like the fact that, he combines what you see in the camp circuit with what you're going to find on the field in terms of his quickness. He really good tester. I think he's in the 4.4, maybe 4.5 range, and then that speed shows up. Still a little slight probably in his build overall, Kevin, but a guy that I think we're slowly starting to see him take the next steps. I think last year was kind of his coming out party at Blue Valley Northwest, and there was a game or two there where he did get kind of nicked up and sat out. But I think the quicker that he can kind of put on a little bit of weight, and I know for some guys it's tough, the better he's going to be able to withstand some of that contact and things like that. But again, just a good player on both sides of the ball. I know Kansas State, when I had talked to Trevor in the winter, was even kind of interested in seeing a little bit more of him potentially as a safety or somewhere in the defensive backfield. And maybe he can do that, but in terms of the 7-on-7 camp, just another strong performance from him as a receiver. Aiden McGivney is another guy who's got a basketball background in Blue Valley Northwest, but a guy I really like that's a 2026, so he's going into his junior season. And a guy that we heard about, Kevin, if this is why you tune into this show, folks, a guy that we're hearing a little bit of buzz early on this weekend about. He was not present with Blue Valley Northwest at this particular event, but has been catching the eyes of teammates already. And has not even played a varsity snap. Kevin has not even played a high school snap, to my knowledge. Barron Marshall, wide receiver, Blue Valley Northwest. Again, from the things that we heard this weekend, I am highly intrigued to see this young man play. I had one source tell me no doubt 4 to 5 star in the future. So not to put any pressure on young Barron, but again, a guy that we're really excited about. And so when you pair him with Aiden McGivney, with Trevor Garlington, a lot of tools for Blue Valley Northwest to work with on offense.
Yeah, and when you see guys pop like that at Blue Valley Northwest, Coach Ryder and that staff, they do such a great job. You usually hear about a guy before you see him,
right?
But he almost always, it seems like, winds up being kind of what they heard, what you thought they would be, from
right.
a projection standpoint. Sticking it at the wide receiver position, and we've got, I think, 3 of them on our list. A guy I want to talk about is Sam Neeson, because he does have some bloodlines there, being a St. James Academy guy. His brother is John, who is a dominant player at St. James Academy, now at Northwest Missouri State, I believe. Ryan, Sam is a guy not as tall as John, but he got open early, often, and he is probably still open at the time that you're shooting this podcast.
Well, and Big Brother John was more of kind of a go route guy, right? It was just run vertical, we'll throw the ball up, you can go find it. And I think with Sam, there's a little bit more versatility there. There's more elusiveness. I was just really impressed with what I saw from Sam. And quick little side story, St. James at this event didn't have, some of their players had T-shirts with numbers on the back. Some of them just had a cut sleeve T-shirt on with no number. And we couldn't remember Sam's face, couldn't pick him out of a crowd. We had an idea who we thought he was.
He's wearing a helmet too.
Right.
We're had a
feeling who he was. So they're between snaps, and I just decided I'm going to go ask Coach Radke. I can't wait anymore. I want to know so I have more time to watch Sam. So I go over right before the snap, head coach Tom Radke on the shoulder. And I said, which one is Sam again? He's like, he's right here. I said, perfect. That's all I need to know. I'll let you get back to it. I'm walking off. Coach Radke goes, hey. Kevin and I both look over. He goes, he'll probably score on this one. And sure enough, within 3 seconds, ball is snapped. Sam Neeson runs this kind of curl and then pulls it into like a stutter, like a whip, and does kind of a quick spin move towards the outside. defender bites on the curl, he's gone 20 yards downfield. Easiest touchdown catch we probably had all weekend. Sam Neeson at 6 foot 175, Kevin, I think there's something there. And, again, whether he has the tape or not to attract, kind of PWOs from a KU or K-State or Missouri type level, we'll have to see. We'll have to let things play out this fall. But again, Ben Wheeler is a guy that Kansas State just picked up on a PWO strictly because of his athleticism at St. James, and they said, we'll figure out position later. You mentioned big brother Ben. If you're a betting guy, you have to think Sam Neeson's going to get picked up somewhere too, right?
Yeah. And I love that you brought up the versatility because they moved him around. He was on the outside. He would move into the slot now and then. And that makes him really tough to deal with because he can run both sets of routes, right? He's twitchy enough with his route running where he can separate on those slot routes, the pivots, the different things that you see there. And yet he's still athletic enough to win on, the types of routes you want an outside receiver to run. And so when you look at that, I had a chance to see him the first time I did was actually against the Blue Valley team that won it. And, Blue Valley was, the best team there.
Right.
Sam kept St. James, in that game. I don't want to say single-handedly because that diminishes, what the other guys were doing. But, I mean, he might have had 15 catches, right? I mean, it was it's just ridiculous. Just, death 8 to 12, yards at a time over and over and over again. Feels like he's the type of guy that goes somewhere, maybe even like a K-State or a KU on a preferred walk-on. 3 years later, he's in the lineup and he's catching 40 passes and everybody's saying, oh, what the heck? Like, why did this guy get a scholarship?
No doubt. I mean, there were a little different in terms of, I don't think he's quite the polished route runner, but some of that is because, like you said, he's so versatile. They've kind of moved him around the field. I think he might even play a little defense too, but there are some Luke Grimm-ish elements, I think, to his game in terms of how deceptive he can be. And trick, as we saw some cornerbacks into biting. Kevin, why don't I throw one to you this time? Okay. A guy that I know you've been talking about for the last year, and he's at the quarterback position from our host school at this 7-on-7 event, Connor Bohan of Mill Valley. You've been on him for quite a while now, and he's starting to really shine.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk to college coaches, they almost all say, hey, I want a big-framed, athletic guy. We can throw him in the weight room and figure him out later. And I think that's what you have with Bohan. Granted, this was probably about it as well as he's thrown the ball, Ryan, that I can remember. He was throwing some darts around there. One of the things I thought he did a little better than maybe when we'd seen him in the past, too, was in the past maybe there was a little bit of a tendency for things to kind of avalanche down a little bit, a bad pass here, a bad pass there, and next thing you know, like he's not as on target. He was able to bounce back from some adversity really well as a thrower. Even having said that, though, Ryan, I think when you look at Bohan moving forward to the next level, you're not looking at him as a quarterback. This is a guy that went to Northwestern's camp, tested off the charts athletically, tested really well at Lindenwood. He's 6'4", looks fantastic from a body development standpoint and everything else. Runs well, jumps well. We know his trainer, Joseph Potts, talked to him, and he's really high on Connor's fit as well. And so he's a guy, Ryan, that I'm fascinated to see because I do think if it's the right situation, it wouldn't shock me for him. He's a good enough athlete to be a quote-unquote Power 4 guy. The schools right below that, the group of 5, they haven't really come on yet. But I think as the season goes on a little bit, he gets some tape, doing some different things. It would not surprise me at all to start seeing some Max schools or whatever to fill up his inbox.
Yes. And I mean, you saw it in the tape there too. The thing that we were most impressed with, you mentioned it, was he's a really good runner.
Yeah.
And at this 7-on-7 event, it was all throwing. And he would far exceeded, I think, where we saw him at times last year in kind of that rotational role at the quarterback. Now, it sounded like there might be some competition coming into this season for Bohan, but based on what we saw over the weekend, he's going to be a tough one to beat out. And even if he is, they're going to find a spot on the field for him. I'm right there with you, Kevin. I think he's the type of guy that, to me, has a sneaky chance to slide into the Simone conversation because he might have the passing yards. He should have the rushing yards. And even if he's not a quarterback, Kevin, they're going to find a way to get the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and at the next level, when you look at him, is he a wide receiver? Is he a defensive guy? I kind of really like him in that sort of like not quite a tight end, but a big tight end, almost kind of slot like Texas Tech has a lot of times, where you see that big Y, who's 230, 235 pounds. I think Connor could be outstanding at that. And so I'm interested to see where his recruitment goes because I think he's on some radars. I think people are going to want to see those first few games of tape. Would not surprise me to see him, kind of take off. Another guy that it would not surprise me to see, kind of take off from where he's at. A guy that, we did not know who his dad was at the beginning of the day. Tevin Gassaway, Olathe West. And if that name sounds familiar to you, if it doesn't, you're probably younger. if it does sound familiar to you, you're probably an old head like myself in that, Byron Gassaway was a really high-level recruit coming out of the Kansas City area. Wound up choosing Kansas over Nebraska. Had some really good moments at Kansas, but just prior to sort of the booming of the recruiting website era, Ryan, if he had been a prospect, let's say in 2005, 2010, whatever, would have been a 4-star, maybe even a top 100 guy. Now he's got a son, Tevin Gassaway, who is a 6'4" wide receiver at Olathe West. We had a chance to see Tevin play.
I've been talking to you about Tevin ever since I saw him at a K-State elite camp last month in Manhattan. And K-State was actually working him both ways at wide receiver and defensive back. And when we talked to Tevin on Saturday, he admitted he's never played defense. That was literally like his debut coming out party at Kansas State. And I said, well, Tevin, if that was your first time ever playing defense, you might want to talk to the coach at the West about having you play both ways. He is exceptional in terms of just the length that he has. The track times are unreal. He's sub 11, I think 10.77, right, Kevin? In the 100 meters. Really good in the 200 meters as well. He's a guy that he's not super bursty or bouncy, I wouldn't say, in terms of like his explosion, but he's not. That's not to say that he's not quick. Doesn't have quick feet, because we saw him on a couple different routes that were quick slants or something to the inside that just needed him to kind of get off the line and get open, and he can do that. And he's got the frame too, where not only can he do that, but he can position himself like a basketball player and make sure that he's using his body the right way. Didn't really even get a chance to see him stretch the field like I think he can with that speed and with his long strides, because again, 7-on-7, you're condensed to maybe 40 yards. So I'm convinced, Kevin, that we didn't even really get to see his strongest asset as a receiver. Every bit of 6'4". I think he's listed at, 190 pounds, and you can see that. I think he can only go up. He could be 210 pounds before it's all said and done. Mentioned a preferred walk-on offer could be on the table from Kansas State. Other than that, it's pretty much just Minnesota State, Kevin, that I believe is offered. And to me, Kevin, as I throw it back to you again, I think I mentioned with Parker Moore, there's some Kansas ties there, and that's more PWO. I think with Tevin Gassaway, KU would be crazy not to look at him extremely hard for PWO, but maybe even stash away on a back burner as a late filler if they need one at wide receiver. There is massive, massive potential with this kid.
Yeah, I'm kind of mad at you right now, honestly, because I was going to use the basketball player comparison for the way that he moves and the body control that he has. He's a guy, like you said, like it's not necessarily like put your foot in the ground and explode, but he's quicker than he seems because he can adjust and do different things with his body. Right? He's a guy that I think you get into a college strength and conditioning program, he's not just going to get bigger. I think he's going to get faster and more explosive. And when you're talking about a guy that's a 10.7, 700-meter guy, kind of funny, he ran a 10.77 at regionals, then ran a 10.78, then went to state and had wind aid, but ran 10.77. So he really likes being around that 10.77 range. He anchored the state championship team in the 4x100. So, obviously you've got some speed if you're out there anchoring in a 4x100. And so when you look at all those things, the top end speed, like you said, the frame, the body control, all of those things, I would certainly have his tape kind of queued up for those first few games to see, hey, is this a guy we want to take a swing on? Kansas still looking for wide receivers. I know that Kansas is going to be active in the portal there because of the guys that they do, lose over this class. They're going to want to throw some experienced guys in there as well. And so Kansas doesn't necessarily, I don't think, have a ton of scholarships remaining.
Right.
But a guy slips out that maybe they're not expecting. A guy, that maybe they think they have a good chance at doesn't wind up being there. Tevin Gassaway might be a really interesting bet to take late in the process.
Who was the kid, Kevin, that just thought of this? Who was the kid that you and I really liked? I mean, if you can't tell, we're Tevin Gassaway fans early and often already here on this show. The kid that went to ODU from Shawnee Mission South 2 years ago. Blanking on his name. But, he ends up where we started hearing some buzz about him. And next thing you know, he's in the conversation among the Simone finalists, not for the Simone Award, but for the wide receiver award. This seems, it strikes me to be kind of along the same parallels. I think Tevin Gassaway is setting himself up to be a name, like you said, that you're going to have a lot of coaches say, we're going to need to see the first 4 weeks of that tape immediately.
Yeah, Aquan Dunbar was the guy that that did that. And the funny thing about Aquan was, if you remember, he had like a foot or an ankle injury that actually limited him that year. Yeah. He put up all those numbers. So Tevin, knocking on wood, having a clean bill of health this year, could be in an even better situation than Aquan to kind of blow up over the course of the year. Right. Tevin has a chance to be a really big-time guy. Sort of the last guy that we wanted to talk about, we mentioned Lawrence real quickly earlier on. Jalen Parks, with Josh Galbraith not being there, Jalen's a guy that, athletic guy in that secondary. He actually played both ways for Lawrence when we saw him. What stood out to you about Jalen?
Well, when I showed up on Saturday, you had gone to Friday, and so I came, empty-handed on Saturday, and you were filling me in on some of the guys that played well on Friday. And I noticed Lawrence was the number 2 seed going into bracket play on Saturday, and I said, oh, Banks must be playing well, and you said, well, yes, and Jalen Parks has looked really good on both sides of the ball. He carried that into Saturday, Kevin. When you look at his highlights, a lot of defense, but I was equally impressed with him on offense. And I know there's a Missouri Western offer on the table right now for him, a lot of MIAA interest, which feels right. I think he might have the type of ball skills, though, and just how fluid he is with his body in midair and the way that he can time things and see things and carries elements that he's strong at on offense to defense. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe an FCS team take a stab at him if the senior tape is there this fall. I was just really impressed with overall his balance on both sides of the ball. He was a marked man on offense and continued to make plays, and then he goes out on defense, and even though teams weren't really throwing his way, he still found a way to be near the ball. That just tells me he can really read the game very, very well, and an underrated athlete for me when I watch Jalen Parks.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I was talking to somebody about Lawrence just before I saw them, and they said, man, that Josh Galbraith is really impressive. Galbraith wasn't there. They were thinking Jalen Parks. They thought Jalen Parks was Josh Galbraith. And so, watching him play, like you said, the ball skills were apparent. The athleticism was apparent. He's a guy that I think, Ryan, one of the coaches we talked to said that he might have been a little banged up last year too. So a full healthy season, and putting that on tape could really help him. I'm interested to see how that goes, but he was a guy that kind of jumped out and impressed both of us, especially like you said, on both sides of the ball. There were guys that were really good on one side or the other. I thought Parks was one of the better two-way guys that we kind of saw there.
And here's what Jalen Parks has going for him to finish this up is it never hurts when, you've got a guy like Joshua Galbraith that's going to bring in a lot of high major eyeballs, right, and coaches that have connections of their own to all sorts of levels, and they're going to say, what do you know about this Jalen Parks kid? Also, I think Banks Bowen's going to have a pretty solid senior season.
Yeah, he looked great.
So when you combine the recruiting that Galbraith will bring in with just the attention that I think Banks Bowen is going to have, and Jalen Parks being probably, if Galbraith is his number one receiver at kind of a tight end role, Jalen Parks has to be number two, if not number one ahead of Galbraith. I think he's going to get his fair share of possession this fall.
A rising tide lifts all boats. And but before we let you go, one other guy that I did want to mention, not as a sleeper, because he's not a sleeper, Ryan. You didn't get a chance to see him. We did get a chance to talk to him. I had a chance to see him real briefly. RJ Collins from Staley. We had heard tale on the first day of him making a one-handed interception. He happened to have it on his phone, the next day, kind of when we talked to him. Just tremendous speed there, Ryan. Really, really good kid and everything too. But, what do you like about RJ? I know we didn't get a chance to see him, much at this event because he wound up, sitting out with kind of a minor ding on Saturday. But at the same time, there's a lot to like there for Kansas State.
Yeah, we'll see if we can follow our accounts on social. We'll see if we can't get RJ to tweet out that video, and we'll definitely make sure the masses see it because it was a hell of a catch. What stands out to me about RJ is everybody wants to talk about his speed, but when I see him, he's a ball hawk, and I've had a chance to watch plenty of his tape now that he's a K-State commit. Also got to see him at K-State's elite camp, which is where he earned the offer. And again, the speed is there. I mean, he can cut the distance, so quick. Even if he's a step off in terms of his technique, he can make up for it like that. But, again, when you talk about him with Kansas State, they're looking at him to play kind of that nickel role. And in that nickel role, you are expected, as we saw from Reggie Stubblefield, and we've seen it from others, to also be a factor at the line of scrimmage and run support. And when you see RJ, there's nothing about his physical frame that would tell you that suits him, but the mentality that he plays with, Kevin, the attitude, he wants that football. He wants to make an impact however it's going to happen. I wish I could have seen him on Saturday, but we're going to make a point to try and see Staley this fall, so I'll make up for it. A really, really dynamic player and a guy. Again, I don't want to always go this route because he's an easy player for us to pick, Kevin, just based on recent memory. But, you look at the speed, you think about the ball skills, because RJ is also a receiver, just like this player was. And you think about kind of the attitude and the toughness and that work ethic. God, I feel like I bring him up all the time, Kevin, but it's Jacob Parrish clones all over again for me.
I definitely see that. And I see that in the versatility, not just in terms of being able to play offense and defense, but RJ being able to play multiple cornerback spots. I think Parrish is the same way that you can play him on the outside. If you wanted to move him into nickel, I think he'd be really good there. I think RJ has that similar scheme versatility on defense. Like you said, the ball skills are really reminiscent. Jacob was a guy who is fast, but plays even faster than he clocks. RJ, I'm not sure he can play faster than he clocks just because he times so well, but certainly a really good prospect for Kansas State fans to keep their eyes on this fall. And, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks so much for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating, as it would really help us get going. Pass this around to your friends. And until next time, all you out there, take care.